Yeah, I mean, look at that. It looks like a bomb went off.
Yeah, you know, even local people are sickened by this kind of devastation you see. They call it ground zero.
So in this video here, we're going to do like a buyer's beware, right? We know a lot of you guys are out there and you're looking for homesteads and you're leaving the city life. And you might roll up on some property and you have no idea what's going on. You're not from the area. And today we're going to just kind of show you some tall tale signs to look for if you're looking at property. And we're also going to tell you, I'm with my buddy, Dr. Leo, remember? All right, so we're also going to talk to you guys about the damage that's done and, you know, just how you can be more responsible with your land, okay? So we're going to start this whole video off. Stay with this whole video because it's going to be a lot of talk and education and things to look for, because you guys are going to get taken advantage of if you guys get out there and you're going to go try to buy some land. You're not going to know what to look for. You're going to buy it, and then you're not going to be able to grow anything on it. You're going to have a lot of washout. You're going to just have a lot of problems, and you're not really going to understand why. And we're going to try to fill that gap for you so you don't make that mistake, okay? So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about this area we're standing in right now and some of the things that these guys did that were not ethical, and we're going to just talk about that, and Dr. Leo's going to explain some stuff. He actually lives right over this hill here, so here we go. We're down here in the Ozarks.
Yeah, and I moved to the Ozarks because of the beauty of the area and the big trees, but it's changing very quickly.
Yeah.
So now if you buy land in the Ozarks, either it will be very similar to what you see around here with all the big trees removed because they're so valuable, but more importantly, you will be hearing the sound of bulldozers and logging crews all around as this devastation continues.
Yeah. And one thing we were talking about in this video is going to be the ethic treatment of the land. Remember in the last video I did on removing those logs from the mansion, I was talking to you guys that we never go in and harvest live trees. We're only in for the dead trees. We're only in for the downfalls. Some live trees have to be dealt with, but for the most part, we want to let those trees alone. So we're going to spin this around right now. We're going to talk a little bit about how they actually, it's called skidding, and it's how they drag the logs out of the forest, okay? And we're going to show you guys what's happened in just a short time since they did this. And we're just trying to bring awareness to you guys so you know what to look for when you're buying your land, and also what not to do when you own it.
Yeah, correct, because I have a PhD in forestry, and I can tell you that land can be logged there carefully, in such a way that a few years after logging was done, you go in and you don't notice anything. There is no destruction. Nature actually does it all the time. Some of the trees will be dying and some will be taking their place. So there is such a way as natural forestry, or called sustainable forestry, where you can mimic the natural processes and you can produce timber and firewood like what Doug is doing, but without raping and destroying the landscape. So there are a few really big issues with doing it unsustainably. And as Doug mentioned, one is improper transport of the logs when the tree is cut down. If you drag it along the landscape here in the Ozarks, where the soil is very shallow and rocky and dry, you basically create grooves, and the next rainfall will wash all the soil off. It will end up in the creeks, but more importantly, there is no more soil to reestablish the forest that you cut down.
We were talking about that earlier. We're down here in the Ozarks, and it's very rocky down here. That's one of the reasons why Stacy and I moved way up north, is because of the soil. But it takes, how long did you say, for maybe a couple inches of soil?
Well, it takes a very long time, because the soil is very poor of nitrogen.
Right.
So all of these dead trees and their leaves take a very long time to decompose.
Right.
So, you know, it's basically irreplaceable within one's
our
lifetime.
lifetimes, right, or your kids' lifetime. So when the soil is gone, there goes your food and your biome and everything healthy for your feet to be in. Remember, we talked about grounding, and it's hard to ground on these sharp rocks.
It is.
All right, so we're going to show you real quick how they've skidded these logs out straight up this hill. They're supposed to go at an angle.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's more convenient for the loggers to be hauling logs up the hill because it's shorter. But this is what's creating all of this erosion, is when the water runs down following the ski trails. And it should be done the other way around. So if you were wanting to take a log out of here, you would want to go at an angle, following the gradient, just gradually climbing up the hill. And this way, that erosion wouldn't be here. But it's just one winter. They did logging 6 months ago. In 6 months, there is no more soil left in this particular ski trail. You can see all of this erosion happening big time, and it will be exacerbated month by month, year by year.
Rain by rain.
Yeah, unless you do something. And just think about it. This could be prevented by careful logging right there. But once the damage is done, recovering it is almost impossibility. You would need to bring in material and basically disrupt this flow of water, creating small banks so that the water is diverted from the straight line down. And it's huge amount of material, huge amount of labor, and the kind of expense that few people can even afford.
As you was talking about, you can just see how at the top it starts. It's just going to come right on down. There's a big sand pile down here where the rock and everything has already started mounding up. You go at the angle like he was talking about, what that does is create a cross line. So when the water starts coming down, it'll hit that ditch, you know, that little cross line, and it'll disperse this way and this way. And this way, remember that Indian in the commercials when we were kids? The one crying about all the trash on the road? Yeah, this is probably even worse.
It is. And you know, it's just one example. They logged out hundreds and hundreds of acres here. And it's a very small amount of logging that's happening. You know, I cannot take my children on a bicycle ride in the country here without seeing a new section missing. And the section is 640 acres. So square miles are being raped and raised down this way. And it's a shame because it's also completely uneconomical. If you had a long-term approach, even if you were interested in a sustainable stream of income, this is the worst thing you want to do, because if you remove selectively cutting trees, the very expensive and high-quality timber, without destroying the whole ecosystem and the biome, this will keep feeding you and your children and great-children for hundreds of years with no damage done. But here it's like one-time thing, and then for the rest of it, it's only liability, because the forest will never regrow into the bigger 40-inch diameter oak trees that they've been taking out.
So we're at another section of the forest, and as we walk our way back up to where we came in at, we're going to go through each section of the forest, and we're going to explain to you the kind of do's and don'ts. So hopefully you guys are going to enjoy the video, and we're real passionate about this stuff, if you can't tell, because it really matters. And if you guys were just coming out of the city and you would show up here and you would have no idea, you could get snookered, So that's what we're also trying to prevent, is you getting snookered. See how these branches and everything, these are the tops of the trees. They usually leave those behind because there's no value to them. And see how they're all hanging up in the air, and see all this stuff? Go ahead, Dr.
This creates another problem, because once you remove the trees, the soil is depleted of carbon. Right. And you want to replenish carbon as fast as possible, because what happens is these big trees that were here, with the leaves falling on the ground every fall, it was providing nutrition and food for the worms and bacteria in the soil, keeping the soil alive.
Right.
Now that the trees are gone and they no longer produce the leaves, you want to give this soil life something to subsist upon while new trees are regrowing. So it's very important to take all of this carbon, and the tree tops and dry leaves is a very important source of carbon, and return it to the soil. So if only they were spending some more time chopping up these branches, or even grinding them down and chopping them and putting them on the soil, it would be very well. It would capture moisture in the soil, because now with all of this soil gone, it's very important to retain moisture for the soil life. So there is no soil water retention. And more importantly, with all of this vegetation suspended and not touching the soil, instead of rotting, and fungi and bacteria and worms are transforming it back into humus, it will be dry and suspended like that for decades.
Yeah.
I have seen forests that's been logged 30 years ago, and the trees that don't touch the ground, they're still up there because there is no contact with the soil and with the bacteria in the soil and the worms. So it will take maybe another 40 or 50 years for this to be returned to the soil, whereas it's extremely important to take all of this material and do it immediately.
Right.
Now.
It's like kiln drying up there. So then it just gets harder and harder, and then it can't break down as easy. And then what happens is, too, like he was explaining about the leaves and these sticks breaking down, two things should come to mind, right? One, back to Eden gardening, right? You guys are doing that. That's the same thing in the forest floor. That's why it's always lush and beautiful and the trees grow really well. And then the other thing is, did you think about it? No? Hugelkultur. A lot of you guys are taking the logs and the sticks and you're putting them in your raised bed gardens, and then you're putting the soil on top of there, and what happens is those sticks break down and they create all that nice biome for you guys. Same thing here in the forest, and now it's being robbed of all that natural goodness because, you know, some guys came in and didn't care.
Because all of this bacterial activity is very important to reestablish the soil, because basically the soil is built from carbon as the raw material plus nitrogen.
Yes.
And nitrogen comes from nitrogen-fixing bacteria in some plants, etc. So you need these two ingredients for this landscape to recover, and with the branches being left like that, both ingredients are missing.
Yeah, and it just makes it terrible. And man, you guys getting some information here. We're really trying to walk you through this whole thing. Now we're down at the water, right? Because that's one thing we have to worry about. You can live a while without the food, but you cannot live a while without the water. And if you guys are getting your water tables contaminated, you're getting your streams by your place, and you don't know any better, all this stuff is damaging your water supply.
Exactly. You know, there is the thing called riparian buffer. If you do logging, you're supposed to be leaving vegetation along the streams so that it protects the soil and there is no soil erosion, everything washing down into the streams. It's killing the fish, it's building up sediment at the dams. It's really, really bad for the whole aquatic ecosystem. But as you can tell here, there was no buffer left. So all the logging was done all the way down to the stream. Plus, all of the skidding, as we explained, was done improperly at too steep an angle. So all of this soil is just being lost, washed down down the gradient. It's being washed down into the streams and into the water. Not only that, but all of this vegetation, the trees that used to be here before the logging, it was retaining moisture in the soil with all of the leaves and the thick layer of humus there, giving it time after the rainfall to infiltrate into the soil and replenish the water table. Now that this spongy soil is completely gone and will not recover for another hundreds of years, all of the rainfall goes down into the creek and away from here, so the water table drops for groundwater and the springs dry up. One of the local landowners who did logging on 500 acres of land told me that there used to be 11 permanent springs on the property. After the logging was done, in a few years, only 3 springs were left. So we're not just losing the trees and the health of the ecosystem and our future, we are also losing right now the quality of the water and even water availability. The wells need to be dug deeper now, and the soil is just not there to capture this moisture and return it to us for our use, but also for the use of other wildlife and other things that depend on it.
You can see right here, it's almost choking off the creek. See, it's just going to keep filling down, and then this will move over and over and over, and then it'll either bust through it or form a new way or whatever, dam up back this way. So that's not good for downstream, or this whole ecosystem here is now changing.
If you have to transport the logs across the stream, you're not supposed to be doing it here like at this very acute angle. Because see how they undercut the soil bank there, and it will create even more erosion there. And also, if there was any vegetation here along the streams, everything gets busted when the bulldozers come first, making these skid trails, and then they keep dragging and dragging and dragging trees here. If you have to cross the stream, which is not recommended in the first place, you need to be going straight at the right angle, minimizing the amount of disturbance along the stream bed. And here they were almost going parallel to the stream.
I know, I don't mean to laugh, right? But here they're supposed to go straight, they go at an angle. Up there they're supposed to go at an angle and they go straight. Oh my goodness. And the loggers leave their trash behind.
It's a good spot to show you the difference between the healthy undisturbed slope and just a few feet away the one that's been disturbed, so you can see how much difference even a little bit of disturbance makes even after 6 months. So this is how any slope would be originally. It's protected by the moss and the roots of grass and trees and shrubs and everything. It holds everything together so that the movement of water is very gradual. It's not washing any soil away. But just a few feet down here it was disturbed, so instead of this moss and grass and everything covering it, now all of this is being exposed, and with the water, rainwater, and the water from uphill coming down, all of this material now is exposed and will be washed down into the creek.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. It looks like a bomb went off.
Yeah, you know, even local people are sickened by this kind of devastation you see. They call it ground zero. And it's not just something you see in science fiction movies. That's happening here right now in real time. And you mentioned, Doug, about it being illegal. Well, it might be illegal in some parts of the country, but here there are no restrictions on the way you are doing logging. You are supposed to be protecting the water sources and everything, but there is no real enforcement. So they are able to do all of that and reap the benefits short term, leaving the landscape completely devastated.
Now we're just coming off the stream, and like I said, we're walking you guys back around to the front. And here's another logging road right here. Now what they do with these roads, how they build them is, this used to be all trees right here, just like you see right here. It was all right here. They come down with a big bulldozer, they knock them all down, and then the rain comes and it washes away all that dirt, right? So that is not a road. Like if you guys know roads, that's not a normal road. That is erosion happening, taking away all that topsoil that takes generations to restore. And right here, go ahead, what's that?
Yeah, it's a shame because, you know, you could build a logging road properly, just as the logging trail there, or the skid trail, it's supposed to go at an angle, like the county roads are built. It needs to be following the edge of the hill, gradually going up, following the gradient. And if you don't follow the gradient just because it's quicker and less expensive to build it straight up, then when the loggers are gone, it becomes a gully all the time.
And there's big ravines in here, like you could probably break your ankle if you're not paying attention. There's some pretty good ones in here, and it's only been one winter, he said.
Yep.
So just what's going to happen in year 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, and just consider that if you wanted to restore it on your land, you buy 5 acres and you put up your small cabin there, and you think, oh, we're into permaculture, we will spend a lifetime restoring the land. Well, one load of gravel to bring and put here would cost you $300, and there are just 10 loads of gravel just on this small stretch, so $3,000 just to stop the erosion in its tracks. So again, once the damage is done, it's super expensive to bring it back to where it would start coming back to life. It's a multi-generational project at this point.
It's like Grandma said, an ounce of prevention is like a pound of cure, wasn't it? And once you guys use that gravel fix, right, you're going to have to do that all the time. Gravel on your driveway, gravel around the farm, gravel at the homestead. You always have to replace it. And if you have it washing out like this all the time, trucks and trucks of gravel for years and years and years. Very expensive. So see, you guys think you're saving money up front, and you see this place and you think, well, maybe we can do it. And it's just going to be like a money pit without a house on it.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, we think about it in terms of how much it costs. If you go into a store, you think, oh, how much is it per pound of food? Here we talk, how much is it per acre? But there are different kinds of acres.
Right.
Here you are buying not just land that's exhausted, but the one that will be very expensive to even maintain.
Right.
And
and get results from, right? You guys want to get out here and you want to start growing your food like Stacy and I, 90%. You can't do that in year 1, 2, or 3 on land like this. You're going to need land 10, 12, year 15, and you don't have that kind of time. Yeah, or you're going to have raised beds all over the place, and that's what you don't want either, right? You want to be able to use your land that you buy, and you also want to be a good steward of it. So if you guys are owning land out there, don't let these loggers come in unless you really get to know them and talk to them and make sure they're ethically sound.
And that's a big problem, because I know that some people wanted to do responsible logging on their land, and they cannot find the crews.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to take shortcuts. Actually, it's easy, it's faster.
Yeah.
But that's what's so damaging to the remaining value of the property and the trees and the wildlife and everything. Another big thing is that all of this heavy logging equipment takes a lot of hydraulic fuel and oil and everything, and there may be leaks in all of these hydraulic cylinders because it's handling all of these huge logs. And so to be maintained properly, they need to be taking protection of the soil. But look, they left this bucket of hydraulic fluid, and it's open on the bottom, and when there was a little bit left, they just flip it over maybe to sit on, and the remaining fluid drained into the soil. You cannot tell, but it smells oil here, because this is where they were storing their equipment while they were doing the logging. So there are all of these spots saturated with their oil that was just drained on the ground and replenished with the fresh one, and all of this trash. Again, that's with the topography we have here, with the limestone and all of the caves in the ground. All of this hydraulic fuel and spent oil goes straight into the groundwater and into people's wells and into their drinking water. Yeah, and speaking about water sources, when we moved to the Ozarks, I started having some horrible digestive problems, something I never had before. I went to the doctor and they took all kinds of tests, and they said, Leo, what's happening in your gut we've only seen in the developing world, like India and Asia, where people drink water contaminated with sewage. And I thought, well, no, we drink water from the well, it cannot be contaminated with sewage, and other members in the family don't have any of the symptoms. And then the neighbor upstream was moving away and was putting the house on the market, and we considered buying it. And when I went to check it out, I asked him about systems, including the septic system, and he told me, oh no, we don't have a septic system. The pipe just goes straight there in that creek. This is the creek that runs through my property, and when we swim in the summer. And he said, isn't it amazing how nature purifies everything? No matter what you throw at it, it makes it clean. And I thought, gosh, for 10 years I was struggling with all the digestive issues and parasites in myself, not realizing that the water in the creek I'm swimming in is contaminated with raw sewage from a few hundred yards upstream by the neighbor.
I mean, come on, can you believe that? Y'all wouldn't do that, would you? Just run your sewage right into a little creek or something now? That's some hoogie bougie. Come on, y'all. But it takes all of us to keep this awareness up, and when we find people doing like this, we got to kind of put the heat on them a little bit, right? So it doesn't go unnoticed all the time. Now we're going to show you something that's kind of really important if all this other stuff wasn't, but it is. And this one really is going to get you good.
Doug, I counted 123 earrings, and that's another huge loss with this kind of logging. What will provide seed for the next generation of forest? With the proper logging practices, you are supposed to leave the biggest, the healthiest, the most beautiful, wonderful trees standing for a few more years after you do the logging, so that the acorns from this particular oak tree and other superior big trees can provide the seed for the next generation of forest, and saturate all of this ground with new saplings that are healthy and thriving and come from this superior genetic source. But of course they don't do that. All of these big trees, some of the stumps here are like 30, 40 inches across. They're all gone, and look at what's left for the seed source. That's one of the reasons why this forest will never ever regrow and recover, is that the superior healthy trees are taken out, and the ones that are inferior have their fungal infections and issues, and that are on their way out. This is the seed source for the new trees, and they will be as sickly as what loggers didn't care to take. So the big trees like what you see here, that's been here since the 19th century, will never again be seen in the ozarks. So think about the expense of it. If it was done properly, and if the big trees were left to provide the seed without any additional expense on your side, after a few years there would be healthy regenerations. There would be thousands and thousands of saplings coming from the soil, and they're eventually growing into full-size trees. But with the seed source gone, the only way you can re-establish the big and healthy trees is by planting them yourself. If you go to a nursery, you see that the quality seedling with a good clump of dirt, you don't really want to buy the bare root seedlings because they have very low survivability. But the one that comes in a pot with a good root system, they're probably between $10 and $20 at least. So just to plant 1,000 trees here to start reforestation would cost you $20,000 in the seedlings alone, not counting your labor. Again, it becomes prohibitively expensive to restore something that could be done at no expense whatsoever if logging was done properly in the first place.
Whoever thought a little walk through the forest could educate you so much. Seriously, like I say, we're just kind of passionate about it. We want to see logging's not bad, but it just has to be done right. Like it's a necessary evil. You have to go through and you have to kind of tend to the forest. But this is what you don't have to do. You don't have to step on it and hurt it and kill it. We can share it.
Another thing about it is that many of these big centennial oak trees are not even valuable to the loggers because they start developing rot in the heartwood in the middle of the log. And if they cut down this huge tree and they discover that it started rotting inside, if there is a big hollow in there, they will just leave it like that. And it's a shame because there is a very simple way to tell whether there is a hollow in the middle of the tree and whether you can just leave it standing there. And this is called coring. A long drill bit. You drive it into the middle of the tree from the side, and if it hits a void, you know that this tree has a void inside. You don't need to cut it down because it won't be a valuable piece of timber. But it's quicker to take the chainsaw and chop everything down, and then the trees that are not valuable you just leave behind. But the damage is already done. The tree that could be left standing is taken out, and all of the bee trees too are being destroyed in the process. One of the local loggers who was clearing 300 acres told me that they destroyed 5 bee trees there on just 300 acres. It's half a square mile. With all of these square miles being logged out like that, hundreds and thousands of bee trees in the Ozarks are being destroyed every year. You know my website, horizontalhive.com, and the book Keeping Bees with a Smile that I published. Well, it hasn't been keeping bees with a smile these recent years because I'm witnessing all of that, and my swarm catching rate has dropped tremendously in the last 3-4 years just because the big trees with the hollows inside that used to house the wild honeybee colonies are being wiped out as we speak.
And one of the things that some of the guys do is they move the trees. They come and knock the trees down because they think they're going to run a big cattle operation. And Dr. Leo and I was talking, and he was saying that you could actually earn more money with bees than you can with the cattle.
Oh, you can, absolutely. Just do the math and you will see that if you buy land like this at 2,000 or 3,000 per acre, that's what they're asking for it, the cattle production from this ruined soil will not be enough to pay even interest on your mortgage, let alone the principal itself.
And you'd be feeding hay a lot.
Yeah. But if it was left like it was, wild, and if natural beekeeping was your source of livelihood, then even without cutting down the trees, you could do as well and even better as the ranchers or the loggers by creating all of this destruction. For example, 1 acre of understory with all the red buds now going into bloom, and then wild plums and sumacs in the summer, and all of the biodiversity we have here in the wilderness create this amazing unpolluted honey produced away from agricultural crops that's super valuable. So I keep telling my neighbors that if you have acreage, put a few hives there, because there are some areas where cattle ranching can be very profitable, but Ozarks with the soil that you've seen is not one of them.
Yeah, and you shouldn't knock down all the trees just to do that. You should work with the environment. You know, you can make a patch for them, but not the whole place, you know? So hopefully you guys got some good stuff from this video. We talked about a lot of nature, a lot of what each thing in nature is dependent on the other, right? So when you start taking away parts of the equation, it's going to mess up this whole symbiotic relationship we have going on there. So we want to be good stewards of our land. You know, we want to pass it on to the next generation better than we found it.
Yes, thank you, Doug. And also, I have a request. Because the reason all of this is happening is that there is now a demand for land in the country.
Yeah.
If you consider even having a few acres in the country as a backup, realize that if you refuse to buy land that's been raped and destroyed, then less of what you've seen will be happening.
Right.
Even 5 years ago, people were doing logging more carefully because they knew nobody will buy land in this state. But now when so many people want to run away from the city and start homesteading, actually it's a very hot market for rural properties. And the way the owner of this land put for me, people from California have no idea and they don't care. They will just go ahead and pay me $3,000 per acre for the land in this condition because they do not know any better. You should know any better, and if more people were very discerning when making land purchases, it would put the pressure on landowners who even consider doing the timber harvest and selling the land to do it more responsibly.
Yeah, and if you're inheriting land from your family, think about this video and don't just be after the buck and let them go in there and rip up your heritage land and then you're going to sell it off. You know, at least be responsible on that end of it. You know, I know a lot of people aren't into the family farm and they're moving on, but at least, you know, treat it with love. Remember, your parents were there building that up all that time, and they would just be brokenhearted to see you treat it like that. So buyer beware. If you guys are moving down into the Ozarks, make sure you're looking at the land, watching the trees, making sure it hasn't been, you know, stripped and neglected and taken advantage of, and make sure you get some good property because it's a beautiful place to live.
You know, it's so easy. I see it all the time. Locals call people dreamers.
Yeah.
The ones who want to have a homestead on the land and to be self-sufficient. So they come and they dump all the equity they got from selling their place in town, and they discovered this hard truth down the years that it's not life in paradise if you move to the land that's basically sick and dying through our own neglect. It's a multi-generational project to try even to restore it, and it's certainly not something that will be economically viable and sustainable. So what you see with this, what local call dreamers, is people have a dream of working and living on the land, but before you know it, you need to go and get a job in town and to be commuting from here an hour and a half to the nearest economic
You don't have you're already behind the 8 ball. You're at a disadvantage, and in your mind you see it all happening, and then you're wondering why it's not happening. And if you don't have this information, you'll never really know.